My name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. In today's episode, the finale of Season 3, I'm going to be talking about ancestral line clearing. Now, I want you to stay tuned to the very end of the episode because I'm going to do a short meditation to allow you to connect to your ancestors and to any particular clearing that might need to happen within your ancestral line. You might be wondering why we need to clear things that are in our ancestral line. Well, let's start first by talking about why you may have incarnated into this particular ancestral line. If you're somebody who identifies as a light worker, then it is most likely the case that you have chosen a particular ancestral line because you are meant to transmute whatever trauma, whatever curses or vows, or anything that has happened throughout the course of the last several generations. In order to do the work to clear this ancestral line, so many of us choose particular parents because of who they are and who their ancestors were. So, for example, if you had some particular trauma in your paternal family line, and there was some sort of belief system in regards to who men are and what they are supposed to be, let's say you have a lot of military men in your ancestral history. That could simply be because it was a belief system that all men were meant to serve their country, or that they were meant to die for their country. And in fact, that is not the case, and that is not something the divine asks us to do. It is simply something that has been handed down from generation to generation. So how do you break that belief system? Well, you have to have somebody who incarnates into the ancestral line who is either able to break that belief system or to energetically clear what needs to be cleared from the ancestral line. So that's where you come in. So as a light worker, you will oftentimes incarnate in order to clear these things within the ancestral line. Your life may look much different than, let's say, your father's or your grandfather's, or moving all the way back through the generations. And that is by design, because you incarnated into this family in order to break the traditions and in order to make sure that you are not making the same decisions and continuing those same ancestral ties. So let's back up for a moment. You have now decided to incarnate into a particular family. You know that your particular light worker job or your mission in that particular family line is to break some sort of pattern. So how do you figure out what that pattern is? Well, the simplest way is to get an Akashic record session, which is something that I do on a regular basis with my clients, is to clear those ancestral lines. But you can also try to discover this yourself. So you can go into a meditation, which, as I mentioned, I will give you a meditation at the end of this episode, and you can really go into that deep place of understanding where your ancestors really started in whatever trauma or whatever belief system you're trying to clear. The process in which I do this clearing in the Akashic records starts with the understanding of how many generations back this particular trauma or this particular belief system starts. So if we're going to use that example again of the military, let's say there are many men who really felt in your family that they needed to die for their country or to serve their country. We can go back and ask your angels and guides, okay, so how far back does this go? So they might say it's 7 generations ago or 20 generations ago. The one thing that's really interesting about this type of clearing, and it's always something that I want to mention because you don't always have to get an Akashic session in order to clear these things, because we're constantly clearing things as we go along our process. So in order to clear these things, it is something that we naturally do. It just takes a lot longer. So being able to access the Akashic records and being able to access your intuition in regards to this subject matter allows you to sort of speed up the process and get things done a lot quicker. Oftentimes, you won't find these sort of generational belief systems or traumas going back much further than, let's say, 7 or 9 generations. They do, in fact, occasionally go back many more generations, maybe 17, maybe 20. But a lot of times the reason for that is because there are some really big trauma that has happened, or there might be some ancestral line curse that has happened in the past, in which case it might be pretty stubborn. Those things are actually a bit more difficult to clear out. So those do take a bit longer in terms of various different generations and lifetimes in order to really identify those particular traumas, those particular patterns. And you have to go back to its origin point And that's where it can get tricky. If you don't have access to the Akashic records, you can still get some of this information, but it will be hard if you're not actually in the records. To get to that origin point, you're going to have to go back to that first generation that had the trauma. So let's say, for example, the first person in that ancestral line who decided they needed to be in the military. It was actually something that was imposed upon them by either the government or society or family, whatever it happens to be. So when you first take a look at that initial generation that had this belief system, it may have been something that was imposed upon them, and oftentimes that is the case. So if it is imposed upon them, then that belief system and that trauma is being basically passed on from generation to generation, when in fact it was never even chosen to begin with. So once you figure out, okay, that was the first generation that was forced to be in the military, and then it kind of spun from generation to generation that even though it was forced upon them, that this is something that is completely honorable, that is something that every man should do, because that is the definition of what masculinity looks like. When in fact, it's completely untrue. True divine masculinity has nothing to do with war. It has nothing to do with killing, and it has nothing to do with brute force. When you take a look at all of these things that just get instilled upon generation after generation, you can see where things just get completely distorted. This is one of the most important reasons why we have to untangle these generational belief systems and all of these traumas, is to be able to move forward in brand new energy. And this brand new energy does not include behaviors that are rooted in something that is not even true and that was not chosen with free will. Another reason why this is important to do is because this is how we start to unravel the energy of toxic masculinity. This is how we start unraveling the energy of groups of people being repressed, groups of people being treated differently than every other human. This is how we start getting to the root cause of things like hatred and racism. This is how we unravel all of these things that have happened in the past from an energetic standpoint. And you may ask, how can we do that when things in the past have already happened? I talk about this a lot with the Akashic records, and that is that there is no past, there is no future, and that everything is happening simultaneously. And if you really want to research that, you can look up quantum theory, string theory. There's all sorts of scientific information out there talking about this concept that we're actually all living all of our lives simultaneously, as opposed to things being in the past or things being in the future. This is how we can create this space of healing for things that have already happened from our perspective in the past. So if you are somebody in your ancestral line who is here to help with more inclusivity, then what you can do is you can go back in the ancestral line and find the origin point of where this discrimination has started. And you can actually connect with your ancestors there and start bringing healing to that space and to that energy. And it's happening across all of the dimensions and across all of the generations. The work that you can do in this life is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So imagine if every single person on this planet decided to do this type of energetic work. They decided to go into their Akashic records or have somebody go into their Akashic records for them and clear this ancestral line, this baggage, whatever it happens to be. Can you imagine the difference it would make in the world if you just cleared your ancestral line? Which that would sort of be your side of the street, your one small part in how you're making a difference in this world. It can make such a huge difference in order to shift the energy for the collective. So the one thing that is always really beautiful to realize is when you are working with the belief systems, understanding their origins and understanding whether or not they are true and whether or not they are true for you, whether or not they are true for society, and whether or not they were even true to begin with, because some of these belief systems were true at a particular time, but maybe they're not true anymore. So as things evolve, so do belief systems. So when you start getting into this work of clearing ancestral lines, non-judgment is a really good place to be. because our ancestors may have done things that were really horrible, that we would consider to be horrendous nowadays. But we have to look at it from a place of compassion, understanding that those were the choices that they made in that time. And you have to be able to have compassion and allow those things to be cleared, because the more judgment and the more hatred and the more, let's say, negative energies that we place upon our ancestors, then what they did is going to perpetuate. And so more hatred and more division is going to continue to perpetuate. So in order to create more inclusiveness, to create more beautiful, unconditional love, we really need to embrace the flaws and understand the growth that needed to happen throughout the course of history. Understand that the other aspect of clearing your ancestral line, it can also affect you personally and physically. When somebody has an ancestral line with a lot of physical ailments, those things have been handed down from generation to generation energetically. Yes, of course, DNA has a part in all of this, but energy is the signature. It is the way in which it gets handed down. There is a reason why you will see generation after generation have the same health problem. If you would be able to basically stop that in its tracks, wouldn't you want to do that? Going in and finding the origin point of a particular ailment is not necessarily a straight line. So let's say you may have a history of cancer in your family, but maybe it didn't originate with just one person having cancer. And that sort of energy being handed down from one generation to the next, that cancer might be a result of a particular ancestor holding on to some deep, deep trauma. And that trauma is being handed down from each person to the next generation. Maybe that ancestor was raped or abused, and that's what ended up planting the seed of this physical ailment. How this physical ailment actually manifests would be different in each person along the ancestral line. So it really depends on where that person's weak point happens to be. So if there is a soul that is working on unconditional love or working on forgiveness, then maybe that particular trauma will affect the heart. Or if you're working on purging grief, then maybe that particular ailment would affect the lungs or something to that effect. So obviously each emotion has a particular connection or relation to each organ in the body or to each place in the body, whether it is an energy center or one of your chakras. It can still be connected to it. Our souls are constantly working on this type of thing. So without our knowledge, they're constantly going to work and helping us clear all of these things in the ancestral lines. There are times when there are blockages. There are things that cannot be cleared or things that are really difficult to clear. And in which case, our soul will actually make decisions to sort of block those things further in order to not have it affect the next generation. So in a lot of my sessions, I've actually come across this very thing where there is a grandmother or a great-grandparent that has blocked the information from the Akashic records. So ultimately what happens is I go back into that particular generation and that ancestor will show me that they have blocked a particular bit of information. I will ask that ancestor if they can unblock and unlock the information so we can move forward and clear the information and clear the trauma. There are times when they don't allow me to do that, and they will literally say, absolutely not, you're not going to unlock this. And they don't want you to see what happened. They are either still in guilt or shame, or they just don't want the information to get out. You are not going to even be able to see this in the Akashic records. But what I can do is I can ask them if we are allowed to clear this without knowing what actually happened. And a lot of times that can work. And in other cases, if I am not able to clear it, then we can at least clear out some of the residual energy that is surrounding that ancestor or surrounding the ancestors moving forward in the generations. There are times when we can't go much further than we are in the actual Akashic Records session. So when it comes down to it, it all depends on the various souls that are involved, all of the people involved in the ancestral line, and if they are in agreement to clearing the things that need to be cleared. There are often times when I can actually speak to the ancestor and sort of have a conversation with them, let them know that it is okay for us to have this information and that there is no judgment and that there is no punishment in regards to what happened. And a lot of times I can sort of talk them off the ledge, so to speak. This allows them to open up the information and release that energy, because here's what happens if an ancestor decides to block that energy or that information because of guilt or shame, or maybe because they're trying to protect the future generations. It's like a dam. So imagine a dam that is holding back an enormous ocean. The ocean is eventually going to break through, right? It's not like it's holding back a small river or a stream. It's holding back an ocean. And that's the divine source energy that always needs to be in the flow. And so if it is trying to be held back energetically, eventually it will break through, or it will seep through in certain ways. So you might find that even if an ancestor has blocked a particular trauma or a curse or anything like that, you might find that that energy is still seeping throughout the generations and affecting your life, and it has affected your parents' lives and grandparents. Sometimes it's hard to determine how that energy is sort of leaking out. So it might not be the full force of what that trauma was, but you're getting a glimpse of where that ancestral trauma is coming from. It's not just about clearing for the collective. It's not just about clearing for your parents or your grandparents. It's also clearing for yourself, because all of these ancestral traumas, belief systems, and curses, all of these things get handed down to you, and they end up affecting your personal experience in this lifetime. So in order to make sure that you are, let's say, operating from a clean slate, and that you don't have any other energies operating within you or around you based on previous generations, it is always good to make sure that you are doing the work that you need to do to clear everything that does not serve you. A lot of times this does mean disconnecting from our relations. So that doesn't necessarily mean disconnecting, meaning that you don't have relationships with them. It means disconnecting from them energetically for a particular period of time. So let's talk about your parents for a second. Do your parents still hold some of those toxic belief systems from your ancestors? Then you will need to sort of distance yourself from those belief systems in order to start changing them. Eventually, you might be able to get your parents or your grandparents or other people in your family to be able to transmute the energy and start changing the outward behavior regarding their own lives. But the work always starts energetically first. The energetics of it need to change, because if you decide to go to a parent and say, well, hey, look, this belief system has been in our family for years and it no longer serves us, it doesn't make any sense anymore if you're not clearing it energetically first. It will always pop up over and over and over again. We've had discussions about this on this podcast about being in therapy, which I'm a huge fan of therapy. But if you're only looking at the outward symptoms, or if you're only looking at the human symptoms, so meaning the emotions or anything like that in regards to a particular trauma, and you're not clearing the energetic signature or the energetic imprint of that particular trauma or that particular belief, it's going to continue to pop up over and over and over again until you address it. So be patient with your parents and your grandparents and your family. Be patient with everybody in your ancestral line, because this type of work does take time. You can clear the energetic signature of these traumas, of these ancestral traumas, very quickly. It is the work that happens after the fact that does take a little time. So we're going to get started on this. A little meditation that I'm going to give you as my gift to you, which is to connect to your ancestors, connect to your ancestral line, to be able to ask them any questions you might have, to be able to get just little bits of information that you might need in order to move forward or in order to clear some ancestral line. All right, so I want you to get comfortable, and we're going to do this little meditation. And as we start off, we're going to start off with 3 deep breaths. So inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. So inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. One more time. Inhale And exhale. I would like you to imagine that you are in a field surrounded by grass and flowers. And surrounding you are a circle of trees, offering up that beautiful divine Gaia protection. I'd like you to imagine that right in front of you, there is a door. And I would like you to open the door and walk inside. This is your sacred space. This is the place where your Akashic records are held. And I would like you to look to your right. That is your entire angelic team standing right there, your spirit guides, waiting for you to ask them for help in any situation you might need help with. And I would like you to ask your angels and guides of the highest divine light to help you with this task of connecting to your ancestral line. And I'm going to pause right now if you would like to have a little brief conversation with any members of your spirit team who might have something to say to you. Allow them to come forward. If you need to pause the podcast right now in order to get a lengthier message from your guides, please feel free to do so now. So I would like you to turn to your left, and there's a very large space, sort of an empty space. And I would like you to imagine the first part of the ancestral line that needs to be addressed. You will either hear or maybe you will see or feel somebody pop into that open space. And just acknowledge that to be the truth. So if you hear mother, or you see a female figure step forward, or you feel that it is a female energy, or maybe you're feeling that it's a masculine energy, that it is on the paternal side, whatever it happens to be, it's just that first instinct that comes to you. It's going to be the right one. So we're going to focus on just one side of the ancestral line for now. So whatever image is coming to you, whether it is for your paternal or your maternal ancestral line, I would like you to step forward and have a conversation with this person who is in your ancestral line. I would like you to ask them how far back, how many generations do you need to go back to start healing this trauma or belief system or curse. Whatever that first number is that they tell you, that is the first number that pops into your head, or whatever you hear or feel, that is the exact right number. Again, if you need more time, you can always pause the podcast in order to get more messages. Once you get the number of generations back, I would like you to then ask this ancestor what it is that needs to be cleared. You can ask if it's a curse, a belief system, a trauma, if it's something that the ancestor did, or maybe something that was done to them. You can just ask and then feel into what the answer is. And then you can ask them if they are willing to tell you what the actual situation was for that particular ancestor. If they are willing to tell you the entire story. Maybe you will see it like a movie, maybe you will hear it. but just allow the messages to come in as they are meant to come in. And once you are finished hearing this story, you can then move forward and ask the ancestor if it is okay if they release this trauma, if they release this belief system. And if they are in agreement, you can ask them to step forward with you. You are both going to be approaching a book that is sitting on a pedestal right in front of you. This is the recording of everything that has ever happened in your ancestral line. This is the Akashic records of your ancestral line. And you're going to ask the ancestor to sign the book, releasing not only themselves, but every person moving forward in all of the generations from this generational trauma, from this belief system, from this curse, whatever it happens to be. Once the ancestor has signed the book, releasing all of that energy from their energetic field, moving forward through all of the generations. You can then ask them if there is anything else that needs to be cleared. And you might find that you have other energies pop up. Maybe these are other members of your ancestral line that may have been affected by this trauma. And if there's some extra additional healing that needs to take place, you can ask your angels and guides to be with you and help to clear all of this energy from the ancestral line. And we're going to thank our ancestors for being with us today. We're going to thank our angels and our guides for being with us, offering up that divine light protection. We're going to thank our higher selves and our soul for doing this work, this beautiful work that helps all of the generations and all of society. And I would like you to imagine that beautiful book holding all of those signatures of the generations is now closing. Any residual energy from this clearing is now dissipating and transmuting into light. I would like you to imagine that you are exiting this beautiful sacred space and that you are entering into this beautiful clearing with grass and flowers and the circle of trees. And I would like you to take a deep breath, and on the exhale, imagine everything that you cleared today is coming out in the exhale. So inhale and exhale. As an extra added bonus, imagine that beautiful divine source energy at your soul star chakra, about 6 feet above your head or 2 meters. And imagine that beautiful divine light raining down through your crown and allowing that beautiful light to permeate every cell of your body, clearing and cleansing as it moves down. Imagine it going down your face, the back of your head, the nape of your neck, your throat, your shoulders, down to your elbows, to the ends of your fingertips, to your heart, your lungs, all of your internal organs, all the way down to your waist, your hips, your thighs, your knees, your ankles, all the way to the tips of your toes, clearing and cleansing as it goes down. When you are ready, you can open your eyes and come back into the present moment. Thank you so much for joining me for this beautiful divine cleansing of the ancestral line and for doing this meditation. You can always come back to this meditation as many times as you need to. You may get more messages each time. If you are having some blockages or if you're having some trouble figuring out what it is you need to clear in your ancestral line, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can reach me through my website at infinitesoullove.com. You can also reach me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111.